Welcome to another edition of the Gulo.
Welcome to a happy Thanksgiving edition of the Gulo here. We have a close friend and regular on the show, Dan May. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too, brother. This is a fun time for all of us Detroiters, all of us Michiganders up there in the great Mitten State. As we approach Thanksgiving, we get to celebrate no matter how bad our football team is. We get to always celebrate the annual Turkey Day game with the Lions. This year they are hosting the Houston Texans, and man, to be honest, I don't know really what to expect with Matt Patricia and this team this year, but like you said, before we hopped on the show, this really dictates how we eat Thanksgiving because we usually eat around 3 p.m. after the game. We're either going to eat in a good mood or we're just going to really just dive into a bunch of bad food, have 3 or 4 helpings throughout that night until we can't feel our stomachs anymore. And so, but we're excited. It's a special edition, so we usually cover Michigan sports. Michigan basketball is actually playing right now. They're beating Bowling Green. It's an exciting time. They're off to a good start. But during this Thanksgiving week, we thought we'd come and bring our favorite Detroit sports moments in our generation. Now, before our generation, Detroit won a World Series and had some fun moments. But during our generation, we got to see a lot of fun things happen, and we got to see some sour things happen as well. But we're going to kind of share our fandom and our experience as kids and growing up and watching some really good sports. And so before we get started though, Dan, I want to hear from you. What's your favorite Thanksgiving day? Bring me through that, what that looked like for you and your family growing up and what it looks like for you now, the food, the game. Bring me through that tradition with you.
Yeah, so typically it's us hyping up the Lions game with my dad. Us talking about it didn't matter who it was, whether it would be an undefeated team or a team that hadn't won. At that point, we would just be hyping it up all day. And unfortunately, more times than not, it would follow up with us just shaking our heads to another Lions loss. But it's just one of those amazing traditions that I hope never stops. That my boys are beginning to experience now. Where when we think of Thanksgiving Day, we don't just think about family. We don't just think about my dad's famous sweet potato casserole, but we also think about us. Talking about the Lions, talking about the good times, talking about mainly the bad times, but that's what Detroit sports is, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the most historical sports cities in America, and a lot of that comes from our grandparents telling us stories, our parents telling us stories, and us going to tell our boys the stories, and that's what makes it so unique, I think, than a lot of other towns.
Yeah, man, I would definitely agree. I know for us growing up, Becky had asked me earlier, are we going to dress up or like do we dress up? And I had to explain to her like growing up, us dressing up for Thanksgiving was wearing our Lions gear. I remember my uncle wearing his Spielman jersey. I always wore my Barry Sanders jersey. My family we wore that old Honolulu and silver every Thanksgiving for that game. And man, it's just such a great tradition. And maybe we're a little bit biased, but I think if you look at it objectively, Detroit is really one of the best sporting towns in America. Not because they win championships every year, but just because there's so much history. And we have now all 4 of our major pro sports literally on the same street, just about within a quarter mile of each other. We have Comerica Park right across the street from Ford Field. And then we have now Red Wings moved from the Joe Louis Arena right off the river there. And now they're sharing Little Caesars Arena with the Pistons, who moved from Auburn Hills and now from the Palace there. Now they're playing at Little Caesars Arena. So we have all major sports teams playing right just about on the same road. It's exciting. And when those teams are good, now granted, a good season for the Lions is maybe a wild card run, but it's exciting for the city. It's exciting for the state because you have blue collared workers who are paying their hard earned money to go to these games, and they show up week in and week out to support Detroit. And when they're doing good and they're having some amazing fourth quarter comeback, that city is alive. When the baseball team is rolling, and during our time, we got to see a good decade of them winning their division, going to the World Series twice. When the baseball team is good, man, Detroit is on fire. And then at the same time, when you have the Red Wings winning Stanley Cups, these last couple years have been rebuild, but we have hope for Steve Yzerman there back in town with the Wings. Man, that city is alive. And then the Pistons back in the day when, the bad boys, and then during our generation with Chauncey and Ben, like that city just comes alive. And there's really nothing like it when you think of Detroit and the sports that they have there every year. And I'm excited for my son Cooper to grow up and I get to share with him the love that I have for my city and all the different sports teams there. Is I'm sure you have already tasted what it's like to share that with your boys as well. Let's kind of go through some of those moments that we remember. First of all, I want you to share with us some of your memorabilia. You have an iconic thing, number 13, seat 13, right behind you. Bring me through some of your memorabilia that you have.
Yeah, so a way that I keep a piece of Michigan in my household is I love Detroit sports memorabilia, and one of the things I have behind me is a seat back from Old Tiger Stadium, which is just takes me back to when I was a kid. Being able to go there with my grandparents or my parents, and it's some of my fondest memories as a kid when we would go and I wish, I love Comerica. I think it's beautiful, but Tiger Stadium was 3 or 4 days older than Fenway. I just would love if they were able to keep that. And then behind me were some signed autographs of some of my favorite Detroit athletes. You got Chris Chelios, Alan Trammell, Miguel Cabrera, and then, for the deep cut, I'm showing, Mark the Bird Fidrich. Yeah. Who, for us Detroit sports people, he's kind of an urban legend of sorts for that one great season he had, I believe, in '67. So one of those years. And, but yeah, so I unfortunately, I've got both my boys' bedrooms is full of it. And it's a way for me to tell them some great bedtime stories.
Man, that's good, dude. It's exciting to hear. I think you're right when you say, because we don't live in the state of Michigan anymore. We live down in South Carolina. And I think the reason why I love the memorabilia so much, I love decking my house out, is because I don't live in the state of Michigan anymore. You live in the state of Michigan, you have your house decked out, but you can also drive down the road to Detroit and experience that weekly if you want to. For us, man, we are removed 800 or so miles away. And so a part of us keeping the state of Michigan and keeping Detroit sports in our house is being able to have this memorabilia. And so that's awesome. Behind me, I have my Lions, my Stafford jersey on. We usually call him Staph Infection because he usually shows up and hurts the team somehow, but he also gives us some exciting moments. Yeah. Oh gosh. I have my Detroit Red Wings hat on, my sweatshirt in the background. My Uncle Phil, shout out to you, Uncle Phil. You're not on Twitter, but shout out to you. Have a couple pictures in the background, Old Tiger Stadium up top and Comerica Park. The picture, I think you have the same one as well. It's the last game played at Old Tiger Stadium and then the first game played at Comerica Park. And man, what a beautiful ballpark. We'll talk about that in a moment. Have my favorite baseball player of all time, Justin Verlander. I don't know if that's backwards for you or not, but it's number 35, Justin Verlander. Have my Tigers hat, and I have Justin Verlander's rookie card right there behind me, and Rip Hamilton bobblehead. I got that at a Pistons camp when I was in 7th grade. This is a couple years after they won the world championship, and I was able to go and practice with some of the greats, and I was able to get a photo with the championship ring. That was really cool. But my favorite has to be this Detroit Tigers hat. This is my – nope, sorry, Justin. This is it was my grandpa's hat. It was the old Ronald McDonald that has the green on the inside. This is my grandpa's hat in the 80s and 90s, and my aunt gave it to me after he had passed away. And that is man, it's just a super memory, great memory that I have. He loved Tigers, and after his stroke, my mom just said that she remembers him just whispering. Maybe this was before his stroke, but whenever Sparky Anderson was the manager there, she said that he would just sit there and whisper to himself like, "Oh, Sparky, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And but anyway, just a lot of great memories there. But let's go ahead and jump into it, starting with Detroit, because we have 4 major sports teams to go over here today. let's go ahead and jump into the Tigers. Dan, bring me through your childhood, because before they hit their decade of success there in Detroit, it didn't look so good. They came off of a World Series win in '84, the roar of '84. We weren't alive for that. And man, they hadn't really made the playoffs since then, and it was really tough in Detroit. Bring me through your childhood before they jumped out to that great start in '06, and kind of the build up to that, and really what happened afterwards. Bring me through your fond memories of our generation with Detroit baseball.
Yeah, so just like any kid, you don't realize how bad it is, especially at a young age, right? You just know that this is a team, especially Detroit sports fans are raised from the ground up. So you know to cheer for the Tigers, and for me, my player was Tony Clark. Most people would know him as the guy who's ahead of the Players Association. For me, he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Played first base for us growing up. I love Dean Palmer. When Dean Palmer was with the Tigers for a short little bit. Davey Cruz, Damian Easley. A lot of names. No one has any idea what we're talking about. But for me, these were my guys. Justin Thompson when he was pitching. I remember when Jeff Weaver was the pitcher. Eventually got traded, but these were the guys that I was cheering on. Out in the backyard pretending to be. As I got older, what was it? 2004 when we lost 119 games. It started to dawn on me, hey, this team's in trouble, because going into that season, we had our legend, Alan Trammell, as our manager. And we're like, hey, Alan Trammell can do no wrong. And sure enough, we lost 119 games. And, but it didn't matter, because in two years later in '06 is when the Tigers really started to turn it around with Jim Leland and the guys.
Yeah, that's right, man. It's kind of the same thing like Harbaugh. You bring in a historic legend for your program or for your organization or franchise, and man, most of the time they don't pan out to the expectations of the fans. And despite whatever happened with Trammell and that team, he's still a legend. Like, people still love him in Detroit, and that was a hard year, obviously, but he will always be a big name in people's hearts in the history there. Yeah, man, I can remember. I remember like late '90s, early 2000s. I would sit there, and a way that my dad would allow us to go to the party store down the road and get hot Cheetos or do something. We always had to do chores, and after our chores, sometimes he'd be like, "Oh man, like my back really itches. Like, can you scratch my back while I watch the Tigers?" So us kids would be scratching dad's back, and it's kind of weird, but I don't know if it was like a good luck thing for him or not. But he'd be like, "All right, if you scratch my back for an hour, like I'll give you $1 to go and get some Cheetos." So we're like, "Yeah." And I can always remember we'd be scratching this old man's back, watching the Tigers lose, and he gets so mad. This guy gets so mad because they lose. So growing up, I was always a diehard Tigers fan, and I knew that they weren't great. But dude, I love baseball. Like, I just read a book I wrote in 4th grade called Mike the Line. It's an awful book, but you look in the biography that I wrote about myself, and my favorite hobby was baseball. And my future job, I wanted to play for the Detroit Tigers, just like every little kid. And that was our dream in the backyard. And in organized sports, we wanted to play in the big leagues. We wanted to play in Detroit. And so, but I knew they weren't good, but it was a part of who I was. And then you're right, man. In 2004, after that really bad year, they went in. But the good thing that Trammell and that organization did is during that time they started making some really big moves. And it was nice because Pudge Rodriguez came on board. We started getting some names, and even though they weren't there yet, really it was, if we get the right manager in here to direct this team, and goodness sakes, man, they could be something special. But I don't think we could ever imagine what happened in 2006 when Jim Leland came on board. Watching interviews with him, I just remember he came on and he was just super cutthroat. He's like, "Look, I'm going to love these boys, but there's going to be no shortcuts. And I'm not going to go out there and say, we need to win this game or we need to win that game. Like, I'm not going to put the expectation on them. We just need to go out there and play good baseball. And we need to play sound baseball, fundamental baseball." And you could see just that. I mean, it wasn't hey, this is going to be a 3-4 year build. Like, 2006 was the year, man, and they jumped out, and it was just, I think that was when Joel Zumaya came in, and I remember, even though he was a relief pitcher, he had pitchers back then, like, even though we're only 15 years removed from this, like, it wasn't every day where they were throwing well over 100 miles per hour. You see that more now, but, even 10, 15 years ago, they weren't doing that consistently. So when Joel Zumaya came in as a reliever, throwing 101, 102, maybe 103, dude, it was just amazing. So let's go through that magical year. What do you remember of the 2006 season?
Yeah, so man, 2006, like I've got that starred when we talk about Tigers memories, because we can start off with bringing in Jim Leland and having to understand and appreciate the history that he brought, and then hearing about this pitcher, hearing about Verlander, right, who was drafted in 04, but at this point he was still coming in as a rookie. And then, in April, we had Chris Shelton hitting 10 home runs in the month of April, and us being like, what the heck? Like, we're winning games. We got this Chris Shelton guy, just hitting bombs. And then just, eventually you talk about cutthroat. Chris Shelton eventually was sent down to Toledo, and us trading for a mayor. What's his name? But anyways, from Cincinnati to replace him at first base. And you just, it's so easy to fall in love with a team when they're winning, right? Yeah. It just makes you appreciate the years of pretending to be a Tony Clark or Davey Cruz when all of a sudden, we're winning ball games. And, I'll never forget, I was 16 in 06, and I was working at a sporting goods store. And I know I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but when we were playing Oakland and we had Craig Monroe on second. I'll never forget. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. Craig Monroe on second, Placido Polanco on first, and we had Mags up there. I remember my manager, because we had a TV with a game on, and I was ringing people up, and he was like, "Hey, you need to go watch this," and he had no idea what was going to happen. Yeah. And Maglio hits that home run off of Houston Street, dude. At that point, I was running around the store. Mind you, this was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Yeah. I'm running around the store screaming. No one's stopping me. And man, like dude, 06 is and I'll just never forget, like the players, celebrating with the fans just meant so much more, right? Them high-fiving, popping the champagne on them. Yeah. You had Jim Leland, calling his family over and kissing his wife through the foul ball screen, and 06, man, was just a magical year. And I remember getting home and calling my grandfather, who's a diehard Tigers fan, and being able to have that discussion with him. And it's, not to romanticize this, but when you're away from Detroit, but you're raised and you love a team, it's the number one connection point with family, right? It is. Yeah. And for me to have these discussions with my grandfather, whether they stunk or whether they were good, is something I'm always going to cherish. I remember writing papers about the Tigers in school and sending them to him. And later I found out, after he passed away, he had them framed up in his bedroom. Oh, man. But 06 was the year, man. Unfortunately, we cooled down and we lost in the World Series, but, just a great start to a really nice run for the Tigers.
It really was, man. And I remember I was watching an interview, I think last year, the year before, with Verlander, because he came back when he's playing for Houston. He came back to Detroit for a game, and they're asking him about the 06 season. He just said that, man, they had such a long break between the series, the conference series, and the World Series there. And so after Mags had walked it off against Oakland, I think they had like a week off or so before they played St. Louis. And you got to remember, man, that year was the year where even Detroit, even though they had a good record, they were still underdogs because they hadn't been there since '84. It had been a long time. So when they got there, dude, I remember they, going and beating the Yankees. Like, I remember one of their games got postponed, and we had to play them at like noon or 1 p.m. on a weekday at Yankee Stadium. I remember watching that in class, not watching it, listening to it, because our teacher, who's a big Tigers fan, had stopped class, and we listened to the end of that game in class, and we ended up beating them. And it was like, wow, like, man, I think there's something to this. And I remember going home the next night and watching them, and we ended up beating the Yankees in that 5-game series. And gosh, man, it was so magical. And like you said, it is a very big connection point for us who are, even though I grew up 18 years in Michigan, still now I'm removed from it, but it's a big connection point for my dad and myself. Like, we talk more about sports and, our faith, obviously, in Christ, more than anything else. Like, it's a big connection point for us that we love to share with each other. And even my brother and I, like, we share our connection with each other through sports and in Detroit sports. And gosh, man, that season was so magical. I remember we kind of cooled off during the season a little bit, and it seemed like they were kind of going in a slump, but then they picked it back up, and we ended up beating the Yankees. So now let's get to the Oakland game or the Oakland series. And Detroit's really dominating. I think we were up on them like, I don't think it was a tied series. I think we were up on them like 3-1 or something like that.
I think it was 3-1. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were up on them 3-1. So it wasn't like the series was tied or anything. But again, the season was magical, and it was so cold that night. I remember Placido Polanco still wearing that beanie over his batting helmet because it was so cold there in Detroit, and you could see the breath coming out of people. It was so cold, and the stadium was packed. You had that kind of Detroit lure there in the mid-October, but it was just, the energy was up. And I remember watching that game with my dad, and we're sitting there, and it's bottom of the ninth, and we're like, man, if Detroit loses this game somehow and they have to go back to Oakland, like, we don't know, like, we haven't been here since '84. Anything can happen. And goodness, man, when Mags walked that off, I think it was Thomas Brenneman, who obviously that's close to my wife and her family, because he's Cincinnati, longtime broadcaster for them. His dad, Marty Brenneman. I believe it was him who was calling the game, and I didn't realize it was him until a couple months ago when I heard him calling a Cincinnati game, and I was like, that voice sounds so familiar. Where do I remember that from? The '06 game where Mags walked it off against Oakland. I can just remember it now, in the air to left field, and it just goes back. And I can just remember Placido Polanco running around the bases, throwing his helmet off. They're jumping up and down and doing this. And, oh, man, the chills, and the players coming back out. And in that year, it was Kenny Rogers, who I believe he had played for the Yankees, didn't really have a great time there. And he was getting old, and he ended up coming back and having a magical year and really a great playoff run there, and did everything about that. Like, I just have chills right now. And I just remember hearing in the Tigers' march to the World Series when he put it over, and you can just see the fans just going crazy. And it was just years and years of buildup and wait. And this is during a time where, we're going to get to in a second, the Pistons had just won a world championship a couple years before. The Wings were still the team in the NHL, winning 4 out of four cups in 10 years. And so the city of Detroit is just on fire. And when that happened, man, that was amazing. And even though we didn't win the World Series that year, it was still so magical, because I do believe we could have beat St. Louis. I believe if we would have if the series would have been tighter against Oakland, and we would have maybe had a couple days off before we went and played St. Louis, I think that break really killed our team. What's your idea on that? What do you think?
No, for sure. Like, it's something that even my dad said. He said that week-long break is going to hurt the Tigers, and I didn't get it, but you 100% saw it, right?
Yep.
Is that was a team built off momentum.
Yeah.
And because look, on paper, that team wasn't super talented at the point.
Yeah.
You had Brandon Inge, Carlos Guillen was starting to come on his own.
Mm-hmm.
Placido Polanco was talented. First base with
was it Sean?
What's his name? Sean Casey. Sean Casey.
Yeah.
Yeah. With Pudge, Craig Monroe, Granderson was really young at that point.
Yeah.
Marcus Thames. It needed that momentum to carry over, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah. But it started
from,
a great run.
From 06 to 12, exactly. From 06 to 12, you saw how that built a lot of things off of it, right? A lot of those guys kept moving with the team, their experience, and it
was great, man. And then we go and we continue to win our division. We continue to do great. A couple years, I remember 2011, we had a really good team. In 2011, I was
Yep.
like, oh man, like I think that they could go, and they ended up losing. And it was always like we were such a great ball club, but we can never get back to the World Series. But then in 2012, it was another year to where they had everything together. This is obviously, we got Miguel Cabrera now when he was still younger, and I think he got traded to us when he was in 2008, I believe, and he came on board. And again, this is when now I will say this: that was a more talented team in 2012 than we had in 2006. If you look at our pitching rotation, I mean, you're talking Justin Verlander, you're talking Max Scherzer, you're talking Rick Porcello, who was coming in on his own as a 19-year-old kid in 2008 or 2009. He came in, and obviously we traded him off to Boston. But you look at these pitchers who, just them alone, you can build a World Series team off of them at these different ball clubs they're at. They were all on one team, on one rotation. And just to see that, you had them. And gosh, dude, it was just amazing. What do you remember the 2012 season as they were marching towards that World Series run?
Yeah, so in 2012, I was actually on deployment overseas in Japan. So I had a lot of like morning games, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with the 12-hour difference, I would get up early in the morning and catch as much as I could. In fact, during 2012, during the World Series, I was on a tiny little island called Wake Island out in the Pacific, and it just so happens our one of our navigating officers, while we were flying, he was a big Tigers fan, and he would actually radio into headquarters when he could for an update during some of the World Series games. And
Wow.
As unfortunate it was for us to lose once again, and we lost to the Giants, I'll never forget, when anyone questions my fandom as a Tigers, I'd be like, have you ever watched it on a screen this big in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, in the middle of the night? And so, yeah. And don't forget, in 2012 too, we had Prince Fielder, which we really thought was going to be the guy who was going to come around and turn it around for us as well. And, it kind of lines up with our generation of being a Detroit sports fan.
Yeah.
As we get good, but most of the time it's just not good enough.
Yep. Not good enough. That seems to be the story. And especially with the Lions, as we'll get into here in just a moment.
Sure.
But man, yeah, I remember. And again, it seems like St. Louis, we ran into them, and they were a good ball club. And then you look at, the Giants, we ran into them in 2012. And again, they were a good ball club. They had been there, and we just seemed to fizzle out at the end and just kind of get tired. And gosh, man, I remember we pounded the Yankees there in the ALCS that right before the World Series. And I think we beat it. It was like 8-1 or 8-2 or something like that. We got out to like a 6-run lead in like the third inning or something. And it was right then you knew we were going to the World Series. It was right before I left for boot camp, actually. And my dad and I were sitting in a tavern. I had a great burger there. And it was one of the last moments I had before I left for boot camp. We were sitting there in at Homestead Tavern and eating a burger, and we watched the Tigers go to the World Series again in the second time in 6 years. And I remember that last ball that was popped up, and we were waiting for it, and he caught it, and that last fly out. And gosh, man, it was just, again, watching that with my dad before I left for boot camp. I watched it with him in 06 when the Tigers marched to the World Series. Same thing. It was just really special time. And so even though we didn't win the World Series, we won 2 pennants. And now there's excitement again, because as long as the Ilitch family is there in charge of Detroit, the Tigers ball club and the Red Wings organization, I mean, you're going to have an opportunity to win big. And I think we're gonna start building that again. It's been a rough couple of years for us, and with Coach Gardy, with him leaving kind of unexpected, but then again, it's just kind of like, makes sense, but at the same time, it just came out of nowhere. We have AJ Hinch coming in from Houston. There's obviously a lot of things that people think or don't think about him, but he knows how to win, and I just hope that he can bring us back to competitive baseball. Take this young competitive team, this farm system that we've had the last 3 seasons, and do something with it, man. And get some big people in there. And I'll leave it with this for Detroit baseball: is Justin Verlander texted AJ Hinch when he got the job, and he said, "Hey, man, I just want to let you know when Detroit is winning, there's nothing like that city. It is really special when that ball club is winning. You watch out, because that city gets really fun to be a part of when they're winning some big ball games. And I would agree. I would agree with that. And so, but now let's kind of transition to the Red Wings and share some of our moments there, because this is a team to where before 96 and 97, they hadn't won a Stanley Cup in a very long time. But they weren't a team like the Tigers to where they got there, but it just wasn't good enough. This is a team to where they were good enough, and they did it 4 seasons. They won the Cup 4 times in 10 years, just about. I think it was 9 or 10 years, and that was exciting. Bring me through your earliest memories of Red Wings hockey.
Yeah, so Zach, do you remember the 96-97 season?
A little bit. It was
Okay.
more so the big moments in the Stanley Cup. I remember the biggest thing I remember from the 96-97 season was the Avalanche and
Yes.
that rivalry. Yes.
Yeah, so that's so true. Is like that dawned on me that, like, hey, we are not supposed to like that team with the stupid foot on their shoulders. And and shout out to my Aunt Kelly for really teaching me that. And I have a funny Aunt Kelly story later on. But 96-97, man, like, I'll just never forget, like, the excitement in the air, even all the way down south of the Wings winning it. And then, my dad getting the Hockey Town documentary VHS tape. And man, I used to just watch that over and over and over again, just to fully understand what that meant, as a Red Wings fan, as a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
And from then on, man, like, I got it. I understood it. It was Hockey Town.
Yeah.
And the Avalanche, like, we'll talk about how unfortunate it is that they moved the Wings out of the Western Conference, because, hockey's missing that type of stuff. Yes, we have our Eastern Conference rivals, but the Avalanche Red Wings rivalry in the 90s was the best.
Yeah, it was, man. And that famous fight to where, and I think you can see the return to Hockey Town. You see Darren McCarty come up and just knock a dude out, and it's just a big brawl at the end of the game. And it's a type of thing to where, in those rivalries in hockey, you make a stupid hit on somebody and you don't apologize for it. If you don't see them for a year, they're still going to remember it, and it's going to be fresh in their mind. And when they come back out on the ice there, you better be prepared and be looking left and right, because they're going to be coming at you with something. I remember the big moments for me growing up. It was we used to ice the driveway. All right, we used to ice the driveway with the hose, and it would snow, and the driveway would get super slick, and my uncles and cousins would come over, and we would set up our hockey goals and our nets. And dude, we would just have at it, and we'd start playing hockey. And I remember my dad would bring his TV out in the garage, and we were watching the Wings and their Stanley Cup run there, and we would be out in the driveway, hitting the puck back and forth and playing an intense game against each other. And it was always so special during the winter time. Usually it's tailgating for football games, but we would tailgate for hockey in the wintertime in the garage, and we'd all play in the driveway. And I never learned how to ice skate, but I always played hockey on foot, and it felt like we were playing on ice because we'd ice the driveway over. And so those are my earliest memories. And I remember Detroit winning those back-to-back cups. And thank goodness, man, especially for Steve Yzerman, bless his heart, dude. He gave so much for the organization. Now, obviously, he's back with us, thankfully. But I mean, the guy got drafted. He was a captain at 18 or 19 years old, and just gave everything for it. And when it finally all came together, they did not slow down. They won back-to-back. I believe it was 96, 97, or the 96, 97 season, the 98, 99, and then they came back again in 2002. Bring me through those first 3 cups, and when they go back-to-back, and then they win again in 2002, right before the NHL kind of takes a hiatus for a year in 2003 or 4, I believe it was. Bring me through again. Now you're growing. You don't just experience the greatness, but you're continuing to build off it to really it's a dynasty.
Yeah, and if you remember at the tail end of that second cup, the terrible limousine accident, right?
Yeah.
And was it Konstantinov, Vladimir Konstantinov, being confined to a wheelchair, and we talk about this being so young, but it also dawned on me as a child too that, like, hey, these bad things can happen to what you consider as superheroes at that point.
Yeah.
And seeing the team rally around that and to still be able to play through and remember that second half, Fedorov was on a holdout and that type of struggle. But to see them win back to back, then it was it. Like then it was, the Red Wings are dominant. They're never going to lose. And it took a couple years after that. And then I'll never forget when we brought in Brett Hull, Luke Robitaille, Dominic Hasek, and it was like, what is going on? Like,
Yeah.
It was so awesome as a Wings fan to be talked to like I was a Yankees fan, right? Where the Wings could just go out and get whoever they wanted. It didn't matter. Mike Ilyich was going to do whatever it took to bring another cup there. And for them to be so dominant, it was really, really awesome. You talk about the Avalanche, right? I'll never forget in that Game 7 against the Avalanche in that third cup season. I was sitting in my Aunt Kelly's house watching it, and remember it was supposed to be a tight game, and we ended up blowing them out of the water 7-0. And my Aunt Kelly has this thing because she hates the Avalanche so much that when the Wings score against them, she loves to like punch you in the shoulder. And I'll just never forget, like after the 5th goal, I was like, "Can I move?" And she was like, "No." She was like, "You're too good of luck." So I got punched in the shoulder like 7 times,
Golly,
just out of excitement. And that one meant a lot more to me because I was a little bit older. I understood what it meant. I followed the team more.
Yeah, I think so too. As you start getting older, you can kind of respect it a little bit more because you're like, man, I can kind of understand what they're going through, what they're putting their bodies through, the training that they're doing, what the front offices are doing, and the moves that they're making to see these things happen. And you're right, dude. People, I mean, still to this day, I know a guy who actually he went to church with us for a while. He was an Avalanche fan for a while, but now he's then he was a Blackhawks fan, but now he's like a Pittsburgh fan. He's jumped around a lot, but he always talks to me about that.
That's like the worst 3.
It's the worst 3, so it's like worse, and even more worse. And I'm like, gosh, it's awful.
Yeah.
But he talks about that big fight, and we usually send the big fight to each other every year on the anniversary, and we just kind of relive that. And man, it's a great rivalry. And I was really young even through the 99 season. Then in 2002, I started getting a big grasp on it and enjoying it more for what it was. And after that, we kind of took a break for a little bit. We had the lockout in 2004, and after that, Steve Yzerman retired, and if he would have stayed there through 2008, he would have got another cup, but he didn't need any. He automatically went down as one of the greatest of all time, and especially in Detroit hockey, obviously behind Gordie Howe and in all time against other people and stuff. And so great player, man. He's like an idol. He's an icon there. I'm playing NHL 06 on my PlayStation 2, and you have Steve Yzerman still there. Even though he's older, it's still cool seeing him there and playing. You have a young Zetterberg on that team. But 2008 is when I think that was one of my favorite seasons because it was kind of a new team. I mean, you did have some people who were still left over from that from those first 3 cups, but you had a lot of new people. You had Nick Lindstrom come in a couple years before then as big defenseman. You had some of your older people there. I believe Osgood was with us now, goalie after Legacy had left. I believe Osgood was with us in 2008. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Osgood and Hasek were still there.
Okay, yep. Yeah, that's right. And then Holmstrom, and you still had a good crew there, but then Zetterberg really takes off, and man, that was just a magical season. I remember, I believe it was either Game 6 or 7. We beat the Penguins there in Pittsburgh, and I always hated winning the Stanley Cup in an opposing team's arena. I always wanted to win in Detroit.
Yeah.
Now, I think the first 2 cups or the first 3 cups we won it in Detroit, and they were able to hoist the cup up there in Joe Louis. But I remember in 2008, it was one of those games where I was like, selfishly, I want to win this at the Joe, but I don't want to wish on that because I don't know if we can hang with them for Game 7 because it was just so tight. It was so intense. And I remember it was in the matter of the final seconds to where they were just teeing off on Osgood, dude. And I was just like, they're going to score. They're going to score. And they didn't end up scoring. We ended up winning that game. Bring me through that game or those final moments as we won the 08 Cup.
Yeah, so you're right. It was a young team, and everyone had been saying, and they were right. That Pittsburgh team was on the up and up
Yeah.
with Crosby and they had what's his name, Avalkin, and they were loaded up. A young Mark Andre Fleury. So we got nervous when we lost Game 5,
Yeah.
and I just remember thinking like this can't go 7 because you saw it. Everyone saw it. Hasek was definitely on his last legs. That's why they made the change to Osgood, and even Osgood was up there and long in the tooth. And just realizing once again, like, that's right. Like, this is going to sound so entitled because us as Detroit fans, we shouldn't feel entitled with all the crap we go through.
Yeah.
But for us, it was like, okay, there it is. Like, because for me, growing up as a Wings fan, it wasn't until I was 25 years old that the Red Wings hadn't made the playoffs. So for me, it was, all right, we're back to where we need to be. Let's keep moving. We got our young guns and Zetterberg and Datsyuk, and we got Lindstrom now as our new captain. Like, they're going to be just fine. And unfortunately, that was it.
Yeah.
You talked about your boot camp story. I was in boot camp in 2009 when we went against Pittsburgh again, and we were up 3-1 when I left, thinking, all right, here we go, another cup.
Yeah.
And I remember getting out of boot camp and finding out we lost in 7. It was like, oh, brother.
That was tough, man, because again, in 2009, it's the same two teams playing against each other. And when you're up 3-1, and you got to remember too, we had to go through Anaheim. There were some really tough teams that we had to go through. So even to get to Pittsburgh, it was, gosh, man, we're having some tough series in these conference finals and stuff. And to even get there to Pittsburgh again was just, I was super impressed with them. But when we went up 3-1, I was like, oh, dude, we got this in the bag. Like, we may not win Game 5, but we will definitely win it again in Game 6. Like, if they drop one in Game 5, I think we'll pull it off in Game 6. And gosh, man, when it went down to the wire again, when it went to 7, I did not feel good about that because the Pens got hot and then we ended up dropping that. Again, it was in the final seconds. It reminded me of the season before where we pulled it out, except now we were on the opposite end and we just could not. We were trying to tee off and score. We couldn't do it. We ended up losing that Stanley Cup. And I think that one hurt because we could have had 5 Stanley Cups in like 10 years. 5 Stanley Cups in 10 to 11 years. And gosh, man, how sweet that would have been. And now, unfortunately, since that 2009 season, we went on a run to where we still consistently made the playoffs. But then, like you said, I believe it was 2000 and was it 15 or 16 where we was the first time we missed the playoffs, or maybe it was 17. I can't remember.
2015.
2015. Okay.
I think it was but yeah, hey, but you know what? While during that little time frame, Stevie Y went down to Tampa.
That's right.
He figured out how to be an amazing GM/president. He's back home, and everything's going to be all right with the Wings.
That's right, man. That's right. It's going to be good. I mean, it's going to take time to build, but he's very cutthroat. He's exactly who you need there in a GM, and I think he's going to make the right moves, and we're going to be just fine. But during this run, during this hockey run that we had in the late 90s all the way up through 2009, you also had another team come in, and they did really good. I don't know what order we were going. I forgot if we're going Lions and Pistons, but I'm going to throw Pistons in there because during this run of hockey, we had the bad boys retire out in the 90s, and then you had this new crew come in the early 2000s, and something really special happened there in Detroit. They ended up going and winning the championship, almost sweeping the Lakers with Kobe and Shaq there. And that game, we were able to see them win it in Game 5 at the Palace there in Auburn Hills. And man, that was a magical season. This is during the times where I'm like, man, Detroit in general is really at an elite level. I mean, you have the Red Wings winning Stanley Cups. You have the Pistons winning Eastern Conferences, winning an NBA championship. They could have won more, but obviously they ran into some tough San Antonio teams, Miami Heat. Cleveland started, going on the up and up there when LeBron James came. So it got tough there, but I thought we could have won a couple championships. Man, it was just an amazing time to be in that city Bring me through your memories there with that 2004 championship team there with Detroit Pistons.
Yeah, so I love basketball. I love all the sports. I love all my teams, but basketball was a sport I played my whole life. And that '04 Pistons team was just perfect because, you know, us growing up, we heard about the Bad Boys, right? I was born the same year that the original Bad Boys with Isaiah Lambier, Rick Mahorn,
Man.
you know, Vinny the Microwave Johnson, and to see that same type of team that's just gritty, that just plays team fundamental basketball, and then you have the characters like Rashid and Big Ben, who was my favorite.
Yeah.
You know, most people thought I wore number 3 at my freshman year for Allen Iverson. I said, no, I wear it for Big Ben. In fact, our homecoming game, I tried to convince my coach to let me wear a Big Ben wig during warmups, and you know, luckily he didn't let me do that, or that I think that would have been some problems. But man, and then, you know, the finals was so perfect, and it's so Detroit of no one giving us a shot. You know, everyone thought this was going to be a quick, easy win for the Lakers, and you know, I don't know if you remember this, Zach, but this is something that always sticks with me. The theme song for the NBA Finals that year was the Black Eyed Peas' "Let's Get It Started."
Yes.
And every time I hear that song now, that's all I think about. It's like Big Ben just dominating Shaq, or Chauncey hitting, like, you know, just clutch shots, or Tayshaun, you know,
dude,
with the infamous block against the Pacers in the prior series. Like, dude, '04 was a '04, and you know, was it 3 years after the fact, was just awesome.
It was amazing, man. It was so fun to watch. And I think Coach Larry Brown came in, and he's really the only coach to win an NCAA title and an NBA championship. And so to have that happen in Detroit is super special. And I remember the '04 season because they got off to a good start, but then they kind of hit a plateau to where they weren't doing great. I remember they were losing a lot of games. It was like we were always missing that final piece to come in and do something great. And here comes Rasheed Wallace, man. He just had that swag about him, dude. That sun tattoo, the yelling out later in his career, "Ball don't lie," just that attitude that you needed. And these boys really rallied around each other because nobody gave them a shot. It was kind of like the Bad Boys. You know, people didn't really like them, and they had people coming in from different places. Like Chauncey Billups came in, and Mr. Big Shot, dude, hitting that big shot against I believe it was the Nets at the time. I can't remember exactly what game it was, but hit a big shot to keep us going. And we ended up going against the Lakers, and everybody thought it was over. But for some reason, you know, especially, I don't know how it was for you being removed from the state of Michigan, but inside the state of Michigan, we thought we were going to win. Like we thought we had a good team. We thought we were really hot at the time. And the Lakers, even though they were still great, there was some controversy going on with, you know, Shaq and Kobe, and it just seemed like they weren't in a great spot. And man, we just came out and hunted them down. And I'll never forget how loud it was on the TV. The Palace was in Game 5 when we ended up beating them, and we blew them out by like 25 or 30 points. And I can remember we got up by like 25 on them, and it was to the point to where we knew we were going to win the NBA championship because we were up by so many points in Game 5. And so the last like 10 minutes of the game was just a party. It was just us, we knew we were going to win, so we got to enjoy 10 minutes of basketball of just us teeing off on the Lakers, on Kobe, on Shaq, and seeing. It was just a big party in Detroit, and even in our own household, just watching that happen, it was amazing.
Do you remember, you talk about that party phrase, do you remember the crowd cheering for Darko, like, to put him in?
Yeah.
And here comes old Darko with his highlights, and like, looked lost as could be, which should have been a red flag for us, but we were just so happy to see Darko get some minutes. And
that's right.
And because he was supposed to be the guy who was supposed to slide in, but
yeah,
man, '04 was amazing. You know, you talked about bringing in Rashid. You know, remember too, we traded Grant Hill a couple of years previously.
Yeah.
And that Grant Hill was my guy. So I mean, as is most people, because he was our one star most of the 90s. And when we traded him, we got this, you know, no-namer called Ben Wallace, you know, Rip Hamilton. You know, we got these guys and we had no idea who they were. And you know, I know Larry Brown won the championship, but you know, I still respect Rick Carlisle for being the guy previously who really formed that team into what it became, of being this gritty, defensive minded team. And, you learn to love those guys.
I agree, man. I mean, it's a lot like Trammell. Before Jim Leland came in, Trammell didn't do a great job as far as on the field, but he set up a lot of things to where when Leland came in, he was able to be the one to bring it to the next level. And I think that's an amazing story within itself. I loved Ben Wallace. I had his jersey, the red version of it. I always loved when they wore that red jersey for some reason. It was just, I don't know. I just really enjoyed it. I had a Chauncey Billups #1 home jersey. Who's your favorite guy during that?
Oh, it was definitely Big Ben.
Yeah.
I just love. I mean, when Fro Ben was out, like watch out because he had the bicep bands and he was just a monster.
Yeah.
So you talk about jerseys. I know the Pistons are probably watching this right now, looking for opinions. Bring back the teal throwbacks.
Yes.
I would love to see.
With
I know
the big
we hated
horse
them then,
there on the front.
Yes, I would love to see a throwback. I was hoping that's what they were going to do with their Motor City alternates, but it's just some gray.
Yeah.
I
agree with you, man. I think they should have brought that back. Please bring those back. If you're watching this, whoever you are out there, please do something about that. Dude, I love Tayshaun Prince for some reason, man. I just love that left-handed. Like it just looked so good, man, behind the arc there, and that was and then obviously his grit that he had going up and blocking that shot against Indiana. Man, that team was special, and again, I think we could have won a couple more championships. We were in the Eastern Conference Finals year after year those next 3 or 4 years, and couldn't get past some really stingy teams. It was hard, but those teams who did beat us, they played great, and then they went on to do good things, and so can't really be too mad about it, but.
But before we move on from the Pistons, I just wanted to share a story about Grant Hill.
Yeah.
So when I went and visited for the summer, and my mom had a friend that kind of like in a weird Detroit style way took us on a Hollywood Stars tour of all the houses of like famous athletes. And I'll never forget going to Grant Hill's house, which obviously was gated, but he had Mickey Mouse ears on the front of his gate, which I just thought was like such a big time move.
Yeah.
So, and I wrote a letter to all the athletes of every house we went to, and I dropped it in their mailbox. And Grant Hill was the only one to respond to me and sent me a signed picture of himself.
Dude, that is so cool.
Yeah.
That is so cool, man.
So Barry Sanders' house was so Barry. It was incredible. I'll never forget that one either. Because it was like just a normal house.
Oh yeah, it was just normal.
So it wasn't in a gated community. It looked like your standard, okay, that's that's a house. It was just so like if there was a way to encapsulate a house in the form of how Barry handled touchdowns, that would be it.
Yeah. Gosh, dude, that's amazing. Yeah. It's so Barry, man. So Barry.
You're right.
So moving on to Barry in the Detroit Lions, these last couple moments that we have here on the show, dude. Let's go through our favorite Detroit Lions moments, man. It's been tough for us. I mean, they haven't won a playoff game since '91. They're awful. They are the worst. They will build you up to just let you down. But even though they are so horrible, and we've gone through some really bad times, the bag over the face, the 0-16, Joey Harrington era, Marty Morningwag, just not a good time for Detroit Lions fans. I tell you what, man, most committed fans that I know. Let's go through some of your favorite moments as a Detroit Lions fan.
Yeah, so one of my favorite ones was Stafford's rookie season when he was playing against the Browns and he got tackled at the end of the game, dislocated his shoulder, and in doing so, they got a roughing the passer penalty. Yep. They pull the game, the Stafford out for a moment. The dude pops his shoulder back in, puts himself back in the game without the coaches knowing, throws the game-winning touchdown. In doing so, dislocates his shoulder again. And to me, you call him staph infection. Matty Stafford will always be special to me because of that. Because that just tells me he was a gamer. And I love the replay. I'll still watch it. Is
yeah.
Megatron trying to celebrate with him? And he's like, "Don't touch me!
Don't touch me! Get off me!
Like,
Get off me!"
don't touch me!
I
Yeah,
remember
he's
that.
like, my shoulder's out right now, and that's one of my favorite ones. I mean, Stafford will be the bright spot of the past 10, 15 years that I can think of.
Yeah, and I tell you what, man, is as much as I joke around about him, I love him, dude, and for what he's given that team, that organization, despite the lack of help that they've given him and head coaches. Even though I love Jim Caldwell, I don't think he should have been fired. Just we're not in a great spot right now. Man, I really love Matt Stafford and just the way that he's kept to himself. He's stuck it out. He's pushed through, and he's given us some really fun moments. I've only been to a couple Detroit Lions games. My last one I went when they played Chicago in December a couple years ago when they wore the gray alternates, and I got my brother and I tickets 7 rows up and saw him throw a bomb to Marvin Jones Jr. and caught that. Like, it was such an exciting game. Now my brother and my dad, they have gone to some very exciting games together. They went to the game where they beat Dallas, where Matthew Stafford fake spiked it and jumped over their heads.
Yeah,
they ended up leaving that game because they thought it was done.
Oh.
My dad's always the guy to where it's like, all right, let's go ahead and hurry up and get out of here so we can beat the traffic, total old man stuff. And my brother Mike's like, whatever. They're walking out and they hear the crowd erupting. And they're like, what the heck's going on? So they go back in and they're seeing through things. They ended up coming back winning that football game. So the next game they went to was Miami when Stafford threw that last second touchdown pass to Theo Riddick in the corner in the end zone. And my brother and my dad were in that end zone. Mike said, no matter what happens this game, we are not leaving Ford Field. And they stayed. They ended up staying through the whole game that time. Stafford rolled out, hit Theo Riddick. And gosh, man, that 2013, 14, even 15 season was so magical. And look, I'm sorry, that was a bad call against Pettigrew. We should have won that game in Dallas.
Dude, you just listed off 2 more of the ones I had written down.
Oh, man.
I mean, the Pettigrew one will always be, whether you're in a coffee shop or bar or wherever it is and you're with a Lions fan, you'll just say Pettigrew, it was a flag, and you could just get any Lions fan worked up about it.
It's awful.
That game alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it was really bad. Again, as many of bad moments that there have been in Detroit Lions football. I mean, gosh, I can remember growing up and watching Barry Sanders, go left and go right. And even though he retired super early, I remember the old Pontiac Silverdome, going there. And I remember going to football games and even high school championship games that were played in the Pontiac Silverdome through 2004, and just that old cold feel to the stadium. But it was so big, so loud, and even when they moved to Ford Field, it was great. We haven't had a whole lot of success. Who's your favorite Lions player of this generation, though, that has had some success?
I mean, Stafford's definitely up there, but I mean, the easy one to say is Megatron. Yeah. I mean, Calvin Johnson was a freak. So you talk about that Cowboys game with the fake spike. I mean, Calvin Johnson was a monster in that game. I believe he went for almost 300 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, he was triple teamed and still catching balls. We think about, the fake spike, but Calvin Johnson beat the Cowboys almost by himself in that game.
Yeah, he did.
And look, I know the Lions are also watching this. Make things right with that guy. All right.
Please, man.
I know it took years for you. It took years for you guys to make things right with Barry. Like, don't do the same thing with Megatron.
Just pay him his $1 million back or whatever it was and get on with it, because he's a great figure for the city of Detroit. That's what we do, though. We have Hall of Fame players. Barry Sanders is the best running back to play the game. Kelvin Johnson is the best receiver to play the game, in my opinion. I mean, just the way he's built and stuff. If he would have continued playing his career and not retired as early as he did, he would have surpassed Jerry Rice and all these receivers and everything. Make it right with them. He is also probably has to be my favorite player. But if I had to really pick one man, Corey Schlesinger, dude. For some reason, I just as a fullback. I loved watching him in that old blue and silver, and there's definitely a lot of fun moments. But please make it right. Make it right for the city. Make it right for the city.
So you bring up Corey Schlesinger, and I kind of wanted to do this challenge to you off the cuff.
Yeah.
I would love for you to name. It doesn't have to be a superstar, but out of our 4 sports teams we talked about, who is that obscure player that you just kind of loved because of whatever it may be, just being a diehard fan. So let's start with the
Yeah.
Tigers. Is there one obscure player that you kind of cheered for?
I'm trying to go through outfield and infield.
I know I'm putting you on this. So I'll say mine with the
Yeah,
Tigers. Mine was
yeah,
Donnie
yeah.
Kelly.
Okay,
I
okay,
love
yeah,
Donnie
yeah, yeah,
Kelly.
yeah. Gosh, man, yeah, that's a really good one. I mean, he was a guy who came off the bench. He didn't play. He didn't play in every game, but he came off in. Um, Goodness, man, I would have to say Sean Casey, even because he wasn't
Okay.
like he wasn't the star of the team, but he was so consistent at first base, and so I would have to say Sean
Yeah.
Casey was probably my favorite, more underrated Tigers players growing up. When it comes to football, Dominic Raiola, the center, I loved him.
Oh
He
yeah.
played there for like almost 20 years.
So here's my Johnny Morton.
Ooh, dude, that's
Slash.
old. Oh my god.
Yeah. I just thought he was so cool when he would catch it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this starts to sound kind of sad when we talk about like who? It's
Who?
like that was our guy.
What are you talking
Yeah.
about? That's our guy, man. Yeah, I remember. Who's your Tiger? Now, obviously, who's your Tiger? I always thought of Mags, but Sean Casey's got to be up there. Talking about the
Yeah.
Pistons, gosh, man, coming off the bench has to be probably Lindsey Hunter. I mean,
Okay.
he was older, like you said, but for some reason he was always consistent when he needed to come in and make that play and just make smart moves. I'd have to go with Lindsey Hunter for sure.
Yeah. On that same note, Mehmet Okur.
Oh,
I just
okay.
thought he
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
just had a sweet stroke and just heat check type guy
yeah, yeah, yeah.
before he went and had a nice career in Utah.
Yeah.
And then I think we're both going to agree on the same one with the Wings, but I'll be curious to hear because I have mine written down. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man, gosh, you're putting me on the spot here. For the Wings, now this is somebody who isn't going to be written in the history books for them, but at the same time they're pretty popular, so it might not be a great answer for you. It has to just be because it's my hometown, Justin Abdicator. Even
okay,
though even though a lot of people don't like how he ended his, kind of ended things there with Detroit, he didn't really play great the last couple of seasons. I mean, his dad was our science teacher in 6th grade and just followed him. And dude was just a hometown guy. I'd have to say Justin Abdicator for sure.
all right. Mine was Darren McCartney.
Okay, okay, yeah. Well,
So
yeah,
you know, outside Wings, like no one's going to know who he is for the most part.
yeah,
I mean, dude was awesome and just a
yeah.
gritty guy, and was able to make a comeback and
If it didn't have to, if I didn't have that hometown tie with Justin Abdicator,
absolutely.
it would be Darren McCarty all day long. I mean, that hit he delivered against
Yeah.
Colorado in the late '90s that solidified my love for Detroit, and so or for Detroit Red Wings. It was even before the Stanley Cup. Like it was that hit that really got me going. And Darren McCarty was always that guy, and really his comeback story from everything that he had went through and dealing with certain things in life and stuff. Yeah, but that's cool, man. Well, it was great having you on here. I know our memories for Detroit Lions weren't as much, maybe as we want or as much as the other sports there, but I'm hoping for a big win tomorrow on Thanksgiving. I hope you eat a lot of food. I'm trying to cut weight, but it's one of those things to where I'm like, you know what? This only happens once a year. I'm going 100% pedal to the metal, and I'm going to eat some food. I'm probably going to watch them lose. And so the bright thing is Becky's a big Deshaun Watson fan, so she'll be cheering on the Texans tomorrow as they come to Ford Field. But it is what it is, man.
Does Becky ever cheer with you, or does she just find a reason to cheer for the other team?
No, I think it's just the way things are set up. Her family was Cincinnati, and I mean, I think we're all mutual fans of each other's teams, but I think when they're not playing each other, we can be collaborative towards each other's teams and stuff. But it just seems for some, for whatever reason, the Texans happen to be playing Detroit on Thanksgiving Day. But I'm gonna try to sell around the Red Wings. When we move up to Greenville, we can go up to Nashville and watch a couple games, or even go to North Carolina and watch them play the Hurricanes. But one of these days, maybe. But anyway,
For
man,
sure,
it was great having you on here again. I appreciate you, Dan, and happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. And looking forward to having you on here again soon.
Yeah, same to you, man.